In the parsha this week, we have a very famous pasuk that we speak about, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada. Now, and the idea of ha'adam eitz hasada, there's actually, it's a difference between the simple meaning. Rashi explains, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada is a question. Is the person a tree of the field? In other words, don't cut off trees in the middle of war. Don't destroy fruit trees in the middle of war. Because is the fruit tree guilty? Is he a person? He's not a human. Leave it alone. But the Chazal read it also, and this is also the reason why we don't have nekudis and punctuation in the Torah, because the Torah can be read in many different ways. So when it says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasada, it's not just like in the simple meaning. Ki ha'adam eitz hasada is a person, a tree of the field? No. It's Ki ha'adam eitz hasada. A person is considered like the tree of the field. And the Sikha is going to explain that because of this, because of the likeness of a person to the tree of the field, there's also that we celebrate the Rosh Hashanah of trees. To such a degree, we don't even say Tachnun on Tu B'Shvat because it's a Rosh Hashanah of the trees. We eat special fruits because it's Rosh Hashanah of the trees. That's how much this pasuk impacts us, that we identify with trees so much. And the Rebbe's question mainly in the Sikha is going to be, yes, you can find a certain similarity between a person and a tree, but you can find a lot of similarities to different things. But it seems to be, from Amar Chazal that he's going to bring over here, that there's something more about a person connected with the tree, more so than the way we compare a person to this or to that or to a different thing. So let's begin. The Gemara is reading it as if it says, not in a question mark way. That the Torah is making a statement that the person is a tree of the field. So therefore the Gemara asks, is that way? Is a person a tree? But here too the Gemara answered, it says first, and you're eating from that tree, and you should not cut it down. And then the next pasuk it says that if it's not a tree that gives food, so then that one you could cut down. So therefore, the Gemara learns from it, ha-ketzad, do we cut down trees? Do we not cut down trees? So he says, Im Talmud Chacham Hagenu Mimenu Toichal L'moide Men Rashi. If he's an appropriate Talmud Chacham, we're soon going to explain what it means Hagun. The Sikha is going to emphasize the word Hagun. And V'oisei loy tichreis, don't cut him down, but eat from it. V'im lav oisei tashchis, it doesn't mean literally tashchis, but sur me'olav, that's what Rashi explains, v'karasa. Meaning that even though he's a Talmud Chacham, but he's not Hagun, if he's not a Talmud Chacham, you have nothing more to learn from him. He doesn't have any information. We're talking about who you're learning from. So who you're learning from, you have to make sure that he's not just a Talmud Chacham, but he has to be Hagun. And we'll explain what that means as we go on the Sikh. Beforehand, the Rebbe asked, "V'tzarich lahavin ma shehikshu b'gemara v'chi adam eitz hasadeh muchach shenaktu she'ashvos ha'adam b'kasav le'etz hasadeh eina rak lefi she'etz hasadeh meshamish k'moshel lahavin achas oikama ma'mailas v'adchunas shel ha'adam." When the Gemara asks this question, is a person a tree of the field? We could see already from the question that he's not asking because we're only comparing the person to a tree, because the tree has some things that you can use as a marshal for a person. If that was the whole point that the Gemara looked at this pasuk, that just comparing it like a marshal to a nimshal in certain points, so then there wouldn't be a question. And how does the Gemara know that it means to compare it more than just in certain point? You can't ask, is the person is a tree of the field, because it's only details. It's not, nobody's saying that the person's a tree. We're only saying Ella, from the expression the pasuk, Ki ha'adam eitz asada. He says in one of the footnotes on the bottom, he says if he was going to tell you, if the pasuk just meant to tell you that the person is just similar to the field, then there could have been a different expression. But this is not just similar. It's this same thing. Elisha Adam hino eitz asada. The Rebbe also says in a footnote that in other places, Mamar Chazal, it will say, Lama nimshol A to B. The Gemara doesn't ask it that way over here. It doesn't say, Lama nimshol Adam la'etz asada. So the Gemara asks, with an attack, with a hatkafa, V'chi Adam eitz asadu. You want to know what's the common denominator? So ask nicely. Lama nimshal adam l'sada. It's not asking that. Obviously, the Gemara understood from the pasuk that we're not just comparing it in certain details, but the person himself is an eitz asada hatoyer eitz mevat loidak pratim chelkim et feilim ba'adam elis kol mitziyusei shel ha'adam ha'adam is an eitz asada. ויש לומר שהדובר מובן גם כך שאין היום תכנן ב15 בשבט ראש השנה לאילונס ומנהג ישראל לאכול מפרס האילון ביום זה וכולו וכי יסוד לכך הוא והכוסף כי אדם עץ הסודה. Why would we go out of our way that we're not trees? Why would we celebrate the Rosh Hashanah of the trees? The trees celebrate our Rosh Hashanah. Why should we go ahead and celebrate that Rosh Hashanah? Sharei im eitz asada ein el mashal al adam ein bekach tam maspik sh'Rosh Hashanah shel ha'eitz yeh yom tov la'adam u'mizeh muvan sha'adam eitz asada mashmoi kanal sha'adam hinoi eitz asada. That's what he is. V'lachein l'Rosh Hashanah shel ha'eitz yesh kesher la'adam to such a degree that we actually celebrate it. We don't say tachnu, no, we eat from the fruits of the tree and so on. Move on, Aleph. If that's so, if that's the approach of the Gemara, that a person is the tree of the field, not just there's certain things that he's compared to, so now we got to understand, if so, what's the Gemara's answer? Keitzad miyusheves kshaylos hagemara v'chi adam eitz asada hu v'ayidei teretz im talmud chacham hagen hu memenu toichal chulum haligam inyan zel l'chayra eina ella aleph mashal v'nimshal hanel modem eitz asada. It would only be a good answer if you want to know how they are compared, what details did they share. But to tell us, because of that a person is an eitz asada, base. It's only in one point, it's only one detail that they're similar. It seems to be that the Gemara never answered the original question. How do you say that a person is an eitz asad? Base. Now a more general question. This connected with the Sikha that we learned last week about the different levels. There's Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, and Daber. The person is at least 2 levels higher than an eitz. There's Daimim, that's the lowest thing. Inanimate things, like water and rocks and minerals and earth and so on. Then there's Tzemeach. Then there's Chai, any type of living creature. Then there's Adam, known as Medaber. Now, except even if you put aside all the other qualities of a Medaber, but he's 2 steps higher than a Tzemeach. If he's so much higher than a Tzemeach, how can you say and compare the two? If you want to compare it to a Chai. Compare it to an eitz. Eichi talking klal l'tayres malsa adam min ha-medaber b'kach shu eitz asada shesh b'tchunin shel tzemeach. It seems to be almost like an insult. What happens if you went to a person and you told them you're a chaya? You went to a person and you told them you're an animal. That would be an insult. So instead, not only do you say that, but you say something worse. You know you're a tree. That's something what we should be proud about. This is something that the Torah tells us. Hein ames sheba'adam nimtza gam inyan hatzemeach ubefrat b'tzmicha saroisa v'tziporna b'chulu. It's brought down in Chazal that different parts of the person resemble different parts of the world and so on, and the hair of a person is likened to forests, for example. So true, there are tzemeach parts of a person. Aval aleph imishum kachari ba'adam nimtzas ma'ilak doilam mazu inyan achai. And it has all these different levels. Diamond, tzemeach, chayim, medaber in it. Beis v'ikir lo yizeu toichen malas adam medaber. Whether it has tzemeach in it, whether it has chay in it, but that's not what makes a person a person. What makes the person a person is something greater. How do we say that that is what he is, not just that he's likened to it? So now, the Rebbe is going to go into this whole sikha, a lengthy explanation of what tzemeach symbolizes. Beruchnius, be'avoida, in a person's nefesh, and why that is what a person is about. Beis, hamaylam yuchedes shabam misyachad min atzemeach, ubiyachas min hamedaber v'chayi. What makes tzemeach unique? That's the word misyachad over here. Lashon yichudius. Shatzemeach einoi mechasa umaster es chayusei ha'amitis, v'mechuber tamid aydei shroshav l'mekoyrei. We'll talk about that. The sikha will talk about it. Lekoyach hatzemeach sheba'adama hanoisen b'chayim v'tzmicha. Tzemach hanitlash min ha'adama chadal li'sameach. It now becomes a diamond. It can't grow anymore. It's dead. It becomes a diamond now. B'chay u'b'medaber lo yimatzinu sheyuchachru li'as mechubarim l'sharshim mekoyrim. Heim eina mechubarim la'adama. Shememeno hois ha'yisavos gam shal min ha'chay v'amedaber ha'kol hoy min ha'ofer. In Kehelos it says that everything came from the offer. And it also says that toitzei ha'aretz nefesh chaya. When Hashem created the animals, He said they should come up from the aretz. And we know Medaber also came from the aretz. He made him an Adama. That's why it's called Adam. Adam from the word Adama, which we also mentioned last week. So Chaya Medaber also came from the Adama. But la'achar hisavusay leidosei shel kol chayim medaber ein hu davik l'sharshim mekodesh shel elidoi. Not like a tzemeach that's always connected to the earth. V'af mezoynim shel chayim medaber ein ba'ba'if namatzrichim lis bechiber l'makom armazin. We don't say that that the medaber or the chay needs to eat something while it's still connected to its source. No, a tree. The roots are in the ground. It gets its sustenance from the minerals in the ground, from the earth, from Beruchnius. Also, there's something called Koyach HaTzemeach Sheba'adama. There's the Maimer Tachi Oretz Desha that's inside the earth, and that gives the Koyach HaTzmicha power for the tree to grow. Mashe'en ken HaTzemeach HaMechuber Tamid LeKoyach HaTzemeach Sheba'adama. Now he's going to talk about your question. On the Moitzim Amnam Al Derech Zeh B'Dagim. Dagim are in Chai. And in Chai we also find something similar to a Tzemeach. HaMuchrachim li'motzei tamid b'mayim makor chayosum. And just like we said by a tree, that if you uproot a tree or you uproot a Tzemeach, it stops being Tzemeach. The same thing by fish, ukishapurshim min hayad miyad heim mesim. Min hayam miyad heim mesim. Va'adrab bohem inyan zeu b'yeser se'eis masher b'Tzemeach. This idea of separating a fish from water totally cuts off their life is even stronger than a tzemeach in the earth. The fish, it's not just, let's say, the tail of the fish or the head of the fish is the whole time in the water. The whole fish is in the water. The tzemeach, it's not that way. The tzemeach, it's only the roots that are in the earth. Not the whole tree is in the earth. So the Rebbe says, but this itself is the advantage of a tzemeach, the greatness and the power of tzemeach, even over fish. Aval hi anesenes bekach gufahu achidish shebetzemeach biyachas ledagim shegam kashur godla pnei adama michutz l'mkaydei. Despite the fact, afal pi, that it's outside of its source, it's not always inside of its source. And so far as it's not inside the source, it could be very far from its source. Those are in California. You're going to visit California, you go visit Yosemite, see those huge trees. So they're very high up. You could think they're so tall, they're so far from the Adama. If they're so far from the Adama, they don't need it anymore. They don't need the shrosh from the ground. So the chiddush of tzemeach over dogim is that dogim have to be completely immersed. Tzemeach is, even though it's not completely immersed, even though it could be very, very high up, but it always has to keep the connection. It always has to have the shroshim at the bottom. Another difference between tzemeach and dogim, v'oid bedogim are kol dag prati, einer mechuber klal lemekoir hachayis haprati shaloi, v'u oiver mimakim lemakim, v'afilu minahar liyam ulahepech, masha enkim b'tzemeach. The tzemeach, where it grows, that's where it's at. It's always connected, unless somebody intervenes, but it's always connected with that source where it came from, where it originally grew out from. The dogim, it has to be in water in general, but there's no specific source of the dog or specific area that the dog is limited to.
What makes it advantage?
What
makes it advantage?
I'm not saying advantage. One second. That's a chiddush about how powerful its connection is. And we'll soon explain what that means spiritually in Bavoida. But it shows that the connection that it has with its source is a stronger connection than dogim have with mayim, because dogim that are in the mayim go back and forth wherever they want. So that shows that the connection is not so strong. The hiskashrus of a tzemeach with its source is much more stronger because it's stuck in the ground, in that place. Now the Rebbe is going to add, we're not talking here about tzemeach b'chlal. The whole pasuk is about trees. So there must be something else that a tree has more than any other tzemeach. Tzmachim acherim kiyoin tevua, pri adama, v'chiyoytze bazeh, einam nisharim b'kiyumam ki tzemeach ha-mechuber la'aretz mishana l'shana ve'ma'abdim es metziyusam. They're seasonal. However long they grow, they're gone after a certain amount of time. Then they either grow again or you got to plant them again, etc. The tree itself remains year after year after year. In other words, again, this is the strength. We're talking here about strength, commitment, power. Where do you see that strength and power? You see it in the tree. More than any other tzemeach. V'adavar meid al chibur chazak b'yoysel l'mkar chayusam. Hanoisim b'em toikev gadol shaloi lihispoil mishenuya hazman ulishar b'kiyumam, and not just to remain. One thing is to remain, and maybe they'll get weaker. But va'af ligdol mishana l'shana. Derech agav, eight has to be able to have this. On bananas, for example, we don't make a bar priya eitz, we make a bar priya adama. Because the main part of the banana tree is something that falls and has to grow up again. Exactly. And the same thing, other types of bushes, if the bush doesn't remain, if it needs to always regrow, so we're going to make on whatever type of berries that grow on such bushes, we're going to make not ha'etz on them, we're going to make bayr priya adama. An eitz that we make a bayr priya eitz on has to be specifically this type of what's called a tree in Lashon Kodesh, in bayr priya eitz, something that's always stronger, and like he says over here, not just strong, but it grows and grows. Every year it grows bigger and bigger, it has more rings, it grows taller, and so on. Now we're going to explain what this means by a person and why a person is Eitz Asada, not just compared to. Ha'adam u'olam katan. He's a microcosm of the entire world. Kishem sha'olam gadol mischalak la'arba sugim. Doim tzameach chaim medaber kach yeshnam ba'adam af beruchniyusoi arba sugim elu. There is, as we mentioned before, there is the gashmius of the person, tzameach, like we said, hairs and nails. These are things that are growing the whole time. But now we're going to talk in the nefesh of the person, and the ruchnius of the person. There's also parts that are called tzemeach, parts that are called chai, parts are called daimim. He's not going to talk about it over here. Parts are called medaber. Mainly over here he's going to talk about the chai and tzemeach that's to be found inside of a person's nefesh, beruchnius. Okay, Chassidus talks about the Midos sheba adam heim hatzemeach sheba nefesh adam. How come? For example, what a child loves is not the same thing what an adult loves. A child is going to love candy, an adult is going to love people or money or whatever it is. The love is something that grows, like a tree grows. The koyach haseichel, on the other hand, Kayim loirak inyan hatzmicha mekatnus legadlus, elagam inyan achai. Why is seichel likened to the level of chai? Habol de bitui betnua v'shinui memokim lemokim kebalachayim hanam memokim lemokim. An animal is not like a tree set in one place. An animal moves, even like we said, the fish. Even in the water, it's moving around. For sure, land animals, birds are constantly on the move. Seichel is not just something that has the tzemeach aspect, that it grows, mikatnos legadlus. It's not the same mind that I have as a child, as an adult. Hopefully even as an adult, my mind grows and so on. But also, there's the idea of movement. What is the idea of movement that seichel is? Meaning mechuber leteva echad. I'm not like a tree. My brain is not like a tree. Ki haseichel inyonei lachker lahavin davar loy lefi cheshke v'retzaynoi ela kemoishu la'atzmai. A tree is set in the ground. The mind can be objective. Could be something I don't like, but I could still understand it. Because the mind is like a chai that moves from place to place. I can go out of myself with my mind. Kach shaseichel hoylech u'mishanes mekoymoi leitim lekava chesed u'leitim lekava gevura. Be'inyan ploini maskonas haseichel isha tzvicha liyas hanhoga shel chesed u'be'inyan achar hanhoga shel gevura v'kiyoytz v'zeh. Even if naturally, for example, I'm more of a chesed person, I might come to the conclusion that in this particular case, we need to go in a way of gevura. Or just the opposite. Why? Because seichel is not limited. Seichel can move. It's objective, and therefore it can move from place to place. Without the input of seichel, mugdaros lefi tivon. Midos hachesed nisharis tamid mitzad atzmo b'kava chesed. V'chein midos hagvura b'kava gvura. Ein zois, the only movement there are in the midos is from small to large. Ela shein soimches mekatnas legadlus. Hey, kishem shatzemeach sheba'olam gadol misyachet kanalt unique. B'mailas hi yoyse mechuber tamid l'shar shoy al derech zel b'bchinas hatzemeach sheba'adam hamidos. Sheyesh b'mayla ala seichel b'kach shedavke heim mechubaras tamid l'shar shom pnimius nefsha adam. Here he says a very interesting point. Based on what we said before, seichel is better than midos. Seichel, I can go out of myself. I'm not limited to who I am. Midos are limiting. But Chassidus also explains the reason why midos are so strong and you get stuck in them. Someone that's in chesed is in chesed, someone that's in gevura is in gevura. It's because really in their source, in the nefesh ha'adam, they have a much deeper source, a more pneumistic source. V'zeu gam hatam lakach sha'midos regish halev yesh b'em kanir b'muchesh toikev gadol v'kasha b'yoser la'avir lakach she'ishtanu v'yachlifu es mekayman al derech ha'amr le'el b'negel li'elanis. It's very hard when someone's midas is in a certain way to move him. It's very hard even for me to change my midas, if that is my nature, if that is how I am. Mi shehu isha chesed b'tivai kasha yeloi b'yosel l'ishkanus l'isha gvura. Val derech zeh lahepech. It's very difficult to change a midah from one to the other. Whereas seichel, I can change my mind. You explain me something differently, fine, I change my mind. You explain me how I should love this person instead of hate him, that's going to take a lot more work. Chassidus always talks about that the purpose is l'shanis tivius midosav. It is possible to change the midas. It's not really totally stuck. El she'ein ze davar harogil al derech haroiv. It's not. Most people don't really go through that. Adam mesugel is gaber besichla al teva midosav va'af l'shanoisem meral l'toiv. Kishem sha'ilanus aydei tircha yiseira la'akra memkaima melantoya oisem amakm macher yitzvachu b'makm achadosh u'li'itim af yeser seisem shamkaima marishon. You could take a tree. It's such a chaval that Larry wasn't here today. You could take a tree and move it. But the Rebbe doesn't point out this thing, but guess what? To move the tree, when is it easier? When it's still a young sapling. The bigger it is, the taller it is. If it's a sequoia, if it's one of these huge trees, forget it. The branches, the roots, it's like crazy. You can't do anything with it. So the same thing, even in Midas, even in changing the Midas, it's a lot easier when we are young. But when we get older, we get set in our ways, we can understand how terrible it is what we're doing, and yet we're like almost stuck. The Rebbe says it's still possible. וזה גופו הוא גם הטעם לכך שהשכל אינו מוגדר על פי טבע האדם. כנראה בחוש שהאדם יכול לחקור ואף לתפוס היטב עם עניין שהוא היפך טבעי. Like we mentioned before, something that's against his interest, it's against his rotzen, I could still understand it. לפי שהשכל, which is the chai part of a שבאדם, באופן גלוי אינו מחובר כל כך לשורשי שבנפש, so it's not so stuck inside of me. It's not so joined inside of me. But it can move around the whole time from place to place. Now we can understand why the Torah says not just that an Adam has some similarities to an Eitz Asada. It's a good mashal for the Eitz Asada is a good mashal for certain things by Adam. But this is what the Adam is about. The true idea of an Adam is what's doing with his midos. Not how smart he is. But where is he in his midos? Ki davke ha-midos, bechinas semech sheboi, mevios l'dei gilui as-sharshon u'mekoiron kefishu bepnimis ha-nefesh. Yesh loimar. שמטעם זה עיקר עבודת האדם היא לא כל כך בעניין השכל, אלא בעיקר בבירור וזיכוך המידס. Tanya speaks about this a lot, how the whole idea of a person's service is kikar v'lech hadar moed b'ficha b'lvav chol la'asoisoi, that it's very close to bring our heart to have a love of Hashem and a yiras Hashem, and that is kizek al adam. Whereas the seichel, that's also, but it's not the main thing. What I do with my midas, what I fix up with my midas, that touches who I am. In a very simple sense, when we talk about a person, we say, what type of person he is. You don't want to hear so much how smart he is, or how not smart he is, or can he come up with new ideas or not. That's not what a person means when he says, tell me about the person. You want to hear, is he a nice person? Is he a giving person? Is he a kind person? So you're saying, what is the person? Their midos is the person. Not how smart they are. How smart they are, that's a nice good thing that they have. It's like asking how much money does he have in the bank. Okay, how much seichel does he have in his head? Who is the person? The person is their Midos. He's a nice person, he's a good person, he's a kind person. So he says, "V'lachein ha'adam magil l'dei shleimus dafkai de avodah zu ad sheshleimus seichel ha'adam v'yadaita." It says you should know the Eibishter. Afi ba'ai de hashpas ha'seichel al midas ha'adam v'ashavois al avecha. The pasuk says v'yadaita ayoim v'ashavois el avecha. Seemingly, if the mind is so much higher than the emotions, why is it important that a pasuk continue v'ashavois el avecha? Because the true purpose of yadaita, of knowing Hashem and understanding things, how is this going to influence me? What's my heart going to be like? What's my emotions going to be like? Because that says who I am. If I know it just in my mind, but in my emotions I'm not touched by it, so then we missed out the whole purpose of the V'yadaita. V'zel mashn is bar b'gemara she'inyan adam meita saden nikar mezgala b'kach she'im talmud chacham hagunhu. A talmud chacham alone could be just in the brain, in the seichel. Hagun hu memenu toichal pirish hagun hu shebetalmud chacham yezeh yeshne lorak masa seichel limud el sichloi mashpial midos of adavar mevil isnaig ba'ifin hagun. We don't care so much how smart he is. We care, does he act in accordance with it? Is his midas in the right place? V'dav kemetalmud chacham zeh toichal mimenu yesh lil moidul kabel ki adam eitz asada mihu adam b'shleimusay she'efshar lil moid mipiv mishu eitz asada hainu shebechinas hatzemeach sheba'adam hamidus shaloi he kedaboy lameva. It's correctly rooted. It's rooted in the ground. It's rooted in where it's supposed to be rooted in. It's not, wishy-washy and moving around from place to place like seichel could move. Shem shadavar amar b'chol yachid b'frat al derech zel b'nei l'chol am Yisrael kol b'nei Yisrael im b'neim shel shloishes avos Avram Yitzchak v'Yankov v'kesher zel avos hu ba'ofen shel chibur tmidi. It's not like an animal that we say moves around, but like a tree. Yidden are connected to the avos like a tree is rooted in the earth. So he says, "K'meshukos v'rach al apasik ki meroish tzurim arenu." Ani mistakel bereishisam ubetchila shroshehem. He's calling the avos the beginning of the roots, the shoirish of the Yidden, like a tree has roots. Vani roya oisam klal Yisrael miusadim v'chazakim ay de avos v'imois. The avos and the imois are the roots that give us our foundation. But what did the avos give us? Seichel or midas? But mem is bat hakesher shall call Yehudi l'shosh avos loy kol kach beinin ha-seichel el beinin ha-mid. But let's see. Yitzaveh bonav, not teach, not so much lalamid, not so much seichel. El beinin ha-midas davke ki yadua. Shloishes avos em keneged shalosh hamidus ava yira v'rachman klos kol hamidus. We know that it says concerning Avram Avinu, he's machnas oirach, Yitzchak, it says pachad Yitzchak, and Yaakov is associated with rachamim, tiferes. Ves hamidus halalu hemerishu lebneim acharem ad oilam kach shebechinas ha'avos yeshem tamid b'chol zman u'b'chol ba'adam. Every one of us has it. In other words, Avram Avinu, though he also was a very great intellect, the Rambam brings down, and other Mefarshim bring down that Avram wrote Sfarim on Kiruv. You have a lot of books that you give out to people, you want to show them the beauty of Yiddishkeit. Avram Avinu, when he was trying to convince people to give up Avodah Zarah, he was a genius. And he wrote different types of logical books to explain and so on. But that's not the part that he's known to give over to his children. Yerusha the connection between someone that's inheriting and someone that they inherit from has nothing to do with how smart they are, how stupid they are. It's an essential bond. Because I am a child of my father, I inherit from my father. Doesn't make a difference how much I understand or how much I don't understand. Even a baby, if they're just born, they already inherited from the father if the father passed away then. For example, a dogma Madregas Avram, Seichel Anel Makol Ryan, it's brought down in Chassidus that Avram means that the level of Abba, Chachma, was exalted. It was such a high Seichel, such a high intellect. That's not so much what we got from Avram Avinu. Ki ha-Seichel ein bei begolikol kach chibur ala etzem v'apnimiyas ha'ivrim b'Yerusha. Ela avidosam b'midos ava v'yira v'rachmim. That is something that we inherited from the others. Why? Because the Midos are more pnimius. The Midos has to do with the pnimius ha-nefesh, has to do with the essential bond. Kivin shetava ha-Midos shalem kashur le-pnimius ha-nefesh. This is also explained. Okay. Achas ha-Yiroz she'eshlimu v'pashas min yizeh mekoir ha-chayis shal Yehudi hu ha-Torah. Ki heim chayenu, it says. Ulam seder achayim shal roi b'nei Adam b'teva nikva pi Torah b'ofen kazeh she'einem kedogim shebiyam ha-metzuyim tadur b'mkoi b'chayusam. What do we say the difference between the fish and the tree? The tree is most of the tzemeach, most of the tree is higher than the ground. It's only its roots are in the ground. Fish are completely submerged. So most of Klal Yisrael are not completely submerged in Archayis, in the Torah, in the Mayim that Torah is likened to. There are very few people that can devote their entire lifetime to Torah learning. I shouldn't think, since I'm working most of the day, since most of my life I'm involved in worldly things, I'm outside of the ground, I seem to be not connected to anything. Hachayis b'Torah and Mitzvos sheyanak ba'ala shel Torah b'terem igia eis lirdoiv, to look for making a living. Tzricha l'yishayir by tamid ad sheyargish hu mechuber b'shah zu lezmanahu. 40 years ago I was in yeshiva, but even now I have to feel that I'm like the tree, that my roots are in the ground. I feel my connection to those years that I spent in yeshiva 40 years ago. Koloymar loyshe ba'avar lamed b'cheder b'yeshiva v'ata hu zoicher ma shehirgish v'asa oz. Ela sheyargish ato es achibur lezmanahu ad sheyargish ezoi chayusoi b'shah zu v'zu mehusoi u'metziyusoi. U'meidach al yosh v'oil ladas she'en dai b'limud ha'Torah levad. On the other hand, how about those few that we said that are able to devote their entire time to Torah learning? They have to know that Torah learning alone is not enough, even though they have the opportunity to sit all day and learn. Like we said before, has to be via daita. And then the purpose of the via daita is to influence the heart. And then even when I do walk out of yeshiva, yishar kasher mechuber lemkar ma'im chaim l'Torah and Mitzvos.